Hi, everybody. Hi, my friends. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State. We're bringing this to you from a car in Washington. I just met with some of Steve Bannon's people to plot the next step in the revolution, and I look forward to keeping you posted on what's happening. This is a very, very important day because the new bombshells are about to break in this Uranium-1 scandal, and God knows where it's going to go. I think there's a real chance that the scandal will erupt and will come to dominate the coverage and our image of the FBI and the CIA. Just let me move this down a touch. That's perfect. My driver is holding it from the passenger seat, and I'm in the back seat. That's cool. Mobility. This Uranium-1 scandal, their silence and not talking about it and not telling us that there was this investigation while it was going on, while the whole uranium issue was metastasizing in our politics, and then having the chutzpah, the nerve, the gall, to make up that Trump was in league with Russia, when in fact it was the Clintons all along, and then to use this as an issue against Trump, I think is going to become completely unraveled. And I think there is a very good chance, and I say this in Rogue Spooks, which we brought out, just as the scandal was beginning, that it will turn out that the CIA and the FBI, let's move this down just a little more, were responsible for the content in the dossier. Christopher Steele, the agent who amassed it, said that he didn't write it. He said it came from unsolicited and anonymous materials. And he didn't say from whom. Now, he's going to have to say from whom. He's going to be put under oath and have to say that. And I think you'll find increasingly that the FBI and the CIA were behind it, and MI6. Listen, ask yourself this question. Why would Fusion hire an ex-MI6 agent to do negative research on Donald Trump? Why would they hire someone with that skill, that pedigree, those connections to do that? Got to be much more expensive, got to be a bit of a chance. And Steele had two key connections. One, he used to work for MI6. The Russians said there's no such thing as a former MI6 agent. Once you're there forever. And he also had at least a financial relationship with the FBI 10 years ago during the FIFA scandal, FIFA, the soccer scandal, where countries resorted to bribery to try to get the World Cup located in their home cities. And most likely, he had a 10-year relationship with the FBI that continued. We know that in the last few years, he had provided the FBI with a lot of material about Ukraine, about Manafort's work in the Ukraine, and about that whole situation. So they may have chosen him because he could be the outlet through which the FBI, the CIA, and MI6 could feed material into a dossier which you could then get out to the American people. And if that comes out, that the FBI was doing that, it is incredible. Let's remember that the FBI, according to the Wall Street Journal, treated Steele as an informant of sorts. It was hoping to pay him for the information he developed. The FBI had previously paid Mr. Steele for information he helped gather during a federal investigation probe into alleged corruption at FIFA, the World Soccer Organization, according to a person familiar with the arrangement. The FBI had agreed to pay Mr. Steele, to continue his research into Trump's relationship with Russia. But the deal fell apart, according to a person familiar with the matter. So, understand the meaning of that. The Hillary campaign hired a group to do negative research on Donald Trump, and the FBI offered to fund that research. Incredible. And former agents said they would be so that that connection is really going to be the subject of increasing exposure. Now, the logjam is basically lifting because the FBI has agreed, under pressure now, to turn over its records of its dealings with Steele and with fusion. And the Congress congressional committees met with Sessions and appealed to Trump directly. And I think based on that, he ordered them to provide this information. Former agents said they'd be surprised if the FBI handed over detailed records related to their source. Handing over investigative files raises alarm bells, they said, because releasing such records may hamper Mueller's investigation. I could see them handing over some of the administrative side of it, like what his name was, contact information, what he was paid and when, said a former FBI counterintel agent. But I don't see it all going over. They have to protect the integrity of the investigation. They'd want to protect the independent counsel in this. But they may not be able to. And the more we learn about the relationship between fusion and the Hillary campaign on the one hand, and Steele fusion and the FBI and the CIA and MI6 on the other hand, the more this becomes a completed loop that itself will be an unbelievable scandal. Now, the fusion documents may reveal that the dossier played an absolutely key role in everything that's happened in politics since Trump took office. First of all, you have to ask yourself, did the FBI know that Clinton paid for the dossier, the Clinton campaign? Well, how could they not? I mean, that's the most fundamental thing, and obviously they must have known. And they paid Steele, and they wanted to continue to pay him. Comey, head of the FBI, was the one who persuaded everybody to send the summary of the dossier to President Obama and to Congress and to Trump. And from there, it's an easy matter to leak it to the media. But let's see what role this dossier played, this phony piece of garbage that had been put together, maybe with the cooperation of our government, to try to frame Trump. First of all, it may have played a big role in the unmasking scandal. The unmasking, remember, is that when the NSA picks up an intercept, it is only allowed to release that American citizen said thus and such. It can only intercept it if an American citizen is speaking to a foreign national. Otherwise, the NSA can't intercept the conversation. But if he is, and the NSA then releases a transcript to a court or something, it has to say, American citizen 1 said to Vladimir whatever, blah, blah, blah. American citizen 2 said thus and such, not giving the names. That's a legal requirement. Now, we know that Samantha Powell intervened with the NSA and said, who are these U.S. citizens? One of them, of course, was Michael Flynn, Trump's nominee to be the National Security Advisor. And that information leaked to the media and ultimately led to Flynn being forced out and ultimately led to his political demise. Now, was the dossier the thing that turned them all on to the idea that they needed to understand who the unmasked people were, that they needed to probe that? Was it that they wanted to play gotcha, looking for something to disqualify Trump from the presidency? And then the FBI went out and got a warrant to surveil Carter Page, who was a part-time sort of advisor to Trump. And but Carter Page's name had never surfaced except in the dossier, where they said that he was one of the key go-betweens between Putin and Trump. Now, in fact, Carter Page was a low-level volunteer who he had a good business. He was in charge, I think, of Merrill Lynch in Russia. But he had never met Donald Trump. He had nothing to do with the campaign. And when he went around characterizing himself as an advisor to President Trump, the Trump campaign sent a memo to him saying, please stop and desist. You're not an advisor. You've never met Trump, and you have nothing to do with the campaign. So he was kind of got his comeuppance for that. And just leave it right there. He got his comeuppance for that. And then the FISA issued a warrant to surveil him. Was that based on the dossier? That was kind of the first time that his name had ever really surfaced. Then the question is, what is Fusion hiding? After they stonewalled and they said, we're not going to tell you anything, when this BuzzFeed litigation proceeded, ultimately Fusion released the fact that Hillary's campaign paid them to amass the dossier. But why did they disclose that? It may be that in advance of the subpoena, they wanted to hide other information that was more significant. Kimberly Strassel, my former friend, my current friend, but my former colleague at Fox News, wrote a column today that I think is very, very accurate in probing that issue. Did they want to hide the names of their other clients by throwing the bone that the Clinton campaign was involved in the activities with Fusion and the Trump dossier? Did they want to hide the name of their other clients? And were these other clients Russia? Remember, Fusion was hired by Russia to be a lobbyist for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. Those are the sanctions that were imposed because of the murder of the investigative guy who unearthed this scandal about Putin taking bribes, and Putin was desperate to repeal this act, worked hard to get it repealed, and hired Fusion as a lobbyist to do that. Fusion, by the way, then hired that woman, Nacha, whatever, who met with Trump Jr. In Trump Tower. So this is all connected. What is the role of the FBI? What was the role of the CIA? What was the role of MI6? What was the role of the Russian government? This is all coming out. And if you've been following what Trump has been saying yesterday, he's echoing what I've been saying for months, which is this scandal is now doubling back on itself and blowing up in the faces of the Democrats and of the Clintons. But you have only just begun to see it. When we begin to get answers to these more fundamental questions, this will be a scandal that will shake the FBI and the CIA and maybe MI6 to its very foundations. It'll be like when all the Kissinger stuff came out about the U.S. involvement with assassinations in Chile and other countries. The Church Committee report that led to 10 years of investigating the CIA. We may find just that kind of a situation. And we may at this point understand the politicization of the FBI and the CIA. In our book, Rogue Spooks, which anticipates and predicts all of this, we have a chapter, How Did the CIA and the FBI Go from Red to Blue? How did they go from being the leaders of conservatism, the bastion of anti-communism, to being left-wing vehicles controlled by the Obama people? And that is the precursor to where I think this scandal is leading. Now, Mueller is finding that he exists on the planet Earth and that he's not some extraterrestrial being. He actually has to follow the rules in terms of spending money and getting appropriations. He actually has to tell Congress what he's spending and get their approval for it. And the congressional committees that oversee that are now demanding that he release details of his spending, of the staff salaries, and they're using the budget process to introduce amendments to limit what he can do, to say you can't spend money on this investigation beyond April 1st. You have to widen it up by then. Or you can't spend any of the money we're allocating to you to probe anything that Trump or anybody else did more than a year before they took office as president or started to run for president. Either limits on subject matter or limits on timing. And those may pass. It also will fuel the concerns that he's overspending. Remember, with the Starr investigation, when I was working with Clinton to fight it, every day we'd put out how much money Kenneth Starr had spent. And with now this information coming from Mueller, I could anticipate something like that happening. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not taking questions today. I should have said that at the outset because Renee's not with me, sitting next to me in the car. I'm in Washington. So I'm sorry, but we'll take a lot of questions on Monday. This is sponsored by Patriot Gold Group. And it's important to realize that when you go into a cash management account with Merrill Lynch or Goldman or one of the other companies, they usually take a 3% management fee each year. And that gets compounded annually. So after 30 years, it's a 70% commission, which means that 70% of your initial savings that you're depositing with them go to them, not to you, and are not part of the multiplication of your investment. One of the nice things about the Patriot Gold Group is that it does not take an ongoing commission, and you don't have this kind of multiplier effect going on. So call them. Renee will post the number on the screen, or go to the patriotgoldgroup.com. patriotgoldgroup.com. Why keep paying a management fee when you don't have to? The JFK assassination files have been released, some of them. Trump is still holding others, and he's giving the CIA and the FBI 180 days to review it. Now, my God, they've only had 60 years. You know, they need another 180 days. But that's okay. They'll come out. But it's increasingly obvious that many of these documents have been destroyed. And given the questions surrounding the assassination, that's horrible. That's criminal to destroy that information. The whole country wants to know the answer to these questions, and particularly after a House committee concluded that most likely Oswald did not act alone and that the Warren Commission was wrong. We're desperate for that information to come out, and for somebody to actually throw out some of the records is outrageous. Now, economic growth is doing very well. It hit 3% for the second quarter in a row, for the first time in 4 years that it's been that good. And it's very clear that Donald Trump has turned this economy around not because of any specific actions or policies, but because of the climate of deregulation, a pro-business climate, and one that encourages people to take risks. Now, the tax cut is going to be the next thing that's going to occupy Congress. And there are two key issues to keep your eye on. One is Congress has said it's okay to run a $1.5 trillion deficit over 10 years. You can do that. And you can cut taxes with that deficit. But you can't go beyond it. Now, in fact, there won't be that deficit because the tax cut will stimulate economic growth, which will replenish those revenues and replace those cuts. But Congress doesn't score it that way. The Congressional Budget Office doesn't believe in what they call dynamic scoring, which would reflect reality, heaven forbid. But there are two issues about where you finance the rest of the tax cut, how you can fund it. One is that a proposal has been made that I think is horrible to restrict 401ks so that you can only withdraw $2,500 a year tax-free, as opposed to the current $18,500 a year tax-free. Now, 401ks, I don't know how many of you have them, but it's the absolute foundation of saving for retirement these days. It's fundamental to it. And to limit that and to say we're going to tax you beyond the $2,500, I mean, what does $2,500 a year contributed to your IRA buy you when you turn 65? For 10 years, you're saving up $25,000. That'll last 5 minutes into your retirement. So that's very dangerous. The other is that Trump is pushing the idea of not deducting your state and your federal taxes. Now, I'm sure every one of you pays property taxes, and you'd like to be able to take that deduction. But that's a minor component compared to income taxes, state income taxes. And what those income taxes do is it's a form of forced federal revenue sharing, where the feds, basically, you and me, pay about a third of California's budget, because we give California people the right to deduct their 10% California tax on their federal income tax, which means we're paying about a third of it because they don't pay taxes on that amount. And naturally, the legislators there are screaming, holy hell, bloody murder, because they don't want their constituents to know how much they're raising taxes and to feel the full burden of their tax increase. Now, one possible compromise would be to permit the deduction up to a certain income level. Another would be to permit income taxes, but permit property taxes, but not income taxes. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but it's worth paying attention to it. Now, on my website, dickmorris.com, I have a petition now for Mueller to recuse himself. I mean, how deeply does this guy have to be in the scandal before he steps aside? We know that when he was head of the FBI, he knew... Just up a little bit. Sorry. There. When he was head of the FBI, we know that he knew all about the Uranium-1 investigation, all about the bribes that Russia was paying to get its hands on that uranium. We know that when he was head of the FBI, he knew about Russia's attempt to infiltrate Hillary's inner circle with sleeper agents and get people close to her. I wonder if Uma Abedin might have been part of that, but I have no evidence, so I'm just saying that as a possibility. But the point is that he knew all of that, and he didn't open his mouth. He knew that Bill had been paid $500,000 to speak in Moscow. He knew that Putin had asked him to get his wife to vote in favor of letting Russia buy a fifth of our uranium supplies, and he did nothing to reveal that. So I think Mueller needs to disqualify himself. He needs to be recused or recuse himself. And I'd like you to sign the petition to do that. We need to create a groundswell for this. We can't just let these revelations that he was silent in the face of this go without a demand that Mueller step aside. Well, sorry not to take questions, but I will on Monday, and I appreciate you staying with me. And now let's go to the airport, okay? Thanks a lot.